Okay. And we're live. Yes. Hello everyone and welcome to this new live stream on the topic of the King Archetype. In the last one, I talked about the King Archetype and symbology and the mythology surrounded to that and how it relates to this symbol of the self, but also the sovereign archetype. And we went a lot into it from the mythological lens, and and partly from the psychological lens. But what is also important is how to embody this in our life, and how to to really make it something practical in our life. I'm here today with Neirum. I want to welcome you, Neirum.
Hey man, thanks for having me again.
Yes, it's a real pleasure. Yeah, yeah. No, I felt like like having a talk with you about it because I really value your perspective, what you bring on these things. Especially the more practical side, because the mythology is very my strong suit, and
Yes.
yeah, I very value your input regarding regarding this, which the experience that you have. Um,
Well,
and
thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know all of the books and stuff. I have more of a feeling or a vibe about it. Just kind of trying to
yeah.
run my household because I'm a recent homeowner. In the past 2 years, and I've just been calling my house my kingdom and trying to build it up the best that I can, and have some stability. I've had some issues trying to, figure out how to do it the right way. Like when you have guests over, when you have your friends over, and somebody's disrespectful to you at your house, how do you deal with that? What do you do? Um,
Yeah.
how, what is your foreign policy on your neighbors? how do you deal with how do you deal with things here with your kingdom and the kingdom of other people around you? Um, and I try to just apply, in a real world sense, what do we have as a kingdom? It's our house, it's our neighborhood, it's the friends that you have, it's the family that you have, it's the people that's in your life. Sometimes you got to cut people out so your house is good. I've had examples of people be very rude to me at my own house, and I've had to kick them out. I've had to tell them to leave because I'm the king of my castle, and I would never act like that at your castle. And I would fully expect somebody to kick me out of your castle if I acted disrespectfully. So
Yeah.
it's been a process because for a long time I haven't had my own home. For a while, you live with your folks, or for a long time I lived on a campground because I wanted to move out. I didn't want an apartment. I wanted to live in the woods. But is a camper a home? I don't know. I tried to make it my kingdom, but when you actually get a brick and mortar house with a yard and you can make a fence and you have a garage and a workshop and you start to get all these things that you're really interested in, you're like, "Oh, this is the kingdom. This is the castle. How am I going to make it?" Recently, I just
Yeah.
put up like 7 floodlights around my house because I wanted to be all lit up if anybody decided to walk around my house. And I had this sense of deep pride about my lights that I put up.
hmm
And I think, it's
Yeah.
it's a wonderful feeling that, men should really become more interested in. Like, yeah, you need to have your own castle. You need to have your own space. You need to set out to make your kingdom. Um, and we've talked about Conan the Barbarian a lot.
Yeah.
I love those stories because that's exactly what that's about. A young man setting out into the world, trying to figure out what the right and wrong things are, and become a king by his own hand. Nobody like knights him. Nobody puts a crown on his head. He puts the crown on his own head. And that's a very powerful thought to me.
Yeah.
So that's
No, but I think that in the end that's really what it is. It's us getting to that point ourselves. It's through the experiences that we have, and through life itself, that we get to that point and start to figure these things out, and not really
yeah,
like anyone can like do it for you, like be like, now you're a king. I feel like it's deeper than that. It's like something that you truly embody, and I think that you can only do that through through the inner work, but also having these experiences in the outside world to get to that to get to that point.
yeah. And I think that's the seed or the genesis of America itself, is this concept that a man must be the king of his own house and his land. You cannot have a king lording over the entire country. You can have a leader, like a president, that leads the military to help defend everybody, but to have a king micromanage everything everyone doesn't work.
Yeah.
The concept of self-individuation, each individual can become their own king. You can set out and find your queen. You can make something together on your own property, on your own land, and that's a sovereign right. That's as they say in our Constitution, it's a God-given right. No man can give you these rights. But what men can do is preserve those rights. We can preserve that gift from the divine or God, or however you want to define that. And that's, I think, the most powerful idea that we cultivated as a people. And that idea is spread everywhere. It's not just America now. It's France, it's Norway, it's everywhere, man. There's, even in China's middle class is starting to feel that, and they're pushing back on their government. And I don't know how long that can last, like communism, when there's these ideas of, hey, yeah, you can be the king of your own castle. You have this God-given right to do that on your own little corner of the earth and make it the way that you want.
Yeah, I don't know. Like what came to mind regarding that, what you said, Neirum, earlier, regarding like the kingdoms and one's own kingdom, but also those of others, and finding one's queen. I kind of also feel that a lot of it also comes into, I guess, embodying the king archetype in like a healthy way, in knowing how to I guess work together as a man in a way that leads to the benefit of, like, everyone in one's kingdom, but also be able to work together with others in a beneficial manner.
Right. Like, are you going to let your neighbor borrow your ladder? Well, it depends. You start out with, lending them maybe a wrench first, and see if they return it, and see if they return it undamaged. And if they do, then maybe you can lend them a saw if they really need one, and see if they return that. And then maybe we can get to the ladder. Maybe then I'll lend you the ladder, and vice versa. Like, if I need something, because, I don't usually, I mean, I don't ask for things, but if I'm just talking about something and a neighbor's like, oh man, I got one of those, you can borrow it. I'm always like, oh my God, I'm going to take such good care of this. I really don't want to upset this person. It's extremely important to be friendly with my neighbor. You do not want to have any trouble with your neighbors. And so I'll be like, no, I don't want to, no, like, no, here. And they just like throw it in your yard, and you're like, you're using that, we're neighbors, you do it, you do that, and then it's like a very big responsibility for me. I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity here to create an alliance. This is a big opportunity to be friendly with another kingdom and enhance my own kingdom through this friendship. And not every neighbor sees it that way. You know, say for instance, I lend the wrench out and then they don't give it back, or do I have to hound them all the time? But like, hey, when are you getting that back to me? It's a no go. You become enemies very quickly at that point. And I think it's important people realize that when you move into a neighborhood, it's extremely important if people welcome you, if somebody like brings you a pie, or if you're there and somebody moves in, it's very important you go over there and like bring them some cookies or something, like welcome to the neighborhood. Like, hey, we're going to be living here forever together. Just want to be friends. Here's some stuff. Like, that makes a huge difference. And I think communities need to start thinking about it that way. Because, you know, we can't live in apartment buildings forever. And I think that's what people are kind of doing. And they're not seeking out relationships. You know, that was kind of, we touched on that a little bit with Where is God's Wife?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. And so you got a lot of people not interested in having a home, not building a kingdom, and they're not interested in finding a queen. There's a general malaise across Western society, at least, of, no, I think I'm just going to live in an apartment and not work on that and rent from somebody. They're going to have a landlord, you know, somebody lording over you forever instead of you lording over yourself, you know, like getting a mortgage, paying off a mortgage instead of paying rent. So many people are interested in just paying rent. They don't want to fool with a mortgage because that's scary. You know, the debt is scary, but through that debt, you become a king, you become an owner, you become your own lord of your own land. And that's just not a goal that I see many people interested in anymore. So the kingdoms are very difficult at this point to create.
Well, maybe to some degree, but I think also when it comes to that, I feel it's also about like you know, in the sense with people in general. Like I think for the King archetype, about very much just cultivating that within oneself to start to embody that in small steps, even if it's not initially you know, like having one's own home or anything along these lines. I think it's also very much about like the you know, the kind of like boundaries one sets with people and how one interacts with people. Because I do feel that if that kind of interaction changes, it has an effect on the people around one, because how they will then start to interact with you. And when it comes to, well, this as like, you know, if we think about like the King archetype, and, you know, also as like this full embodiment of the masculine, like, you know, think like Aragorn, for instance, then it also has effects on like, you know, how one interacts with the other gender as well, because the thing is that you know, and we touched upon that already with like God's Wife, you know, with the part one of that one on it. But I do think that, like, yeah, learning how to embody that in a practical sense, you know, to learn how to set these healthy boundaries and figure that out, and to embody that more in a practical sense.
Well, it's great that you bring up Aragorn, because he's a great example of a man living in apartments, not interested in being a king. He renounced his, you know, his title, because he's supposed to be the king, but he's lost faith in humanity. He's like, nah, we're fucked. Like, there's no point. These people don't listen. You know, it's a lost cause. So I'm going to, you know, be on my own. I'm going to do what I think is right. And he calls himself Strider. You know, he doesn't even want to use his name. Doesn't even want to use his name, his birth name anymore. He denies it. And it takes the friendship of the hobbits and the adventure that they go on for him to regain his want to be a king, his desire to be like, yeah, you know what? These people are worth it. You know, it's worth it now. And he had to go through a battle. He had to literally fight hell to awaken that inside of him again. And I don't know what point we are in our society in that story. Are we in the middle of the battle? Are we still at the bar, you know, watching the hobbits? I don't.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the individual. I mean, where they're at. Maybe I don't know. Sometimes I'm getting the feeling, looking at like the culture and what is playing out, that we're somewhere between the bar and Helm's Deep. Somewhere between that. It
Yeah,
depends.
we're on a quest. Yeah, we're figuring it out. Maybe we're on the rock yelling at the hobbits for cooking food. Maybe that's where we're at.
But yeah, but I kind of do feel that like, you know, we're somewhere in between there, and especially looking at like the more like recent stuff. I don't know, like I do that like once in a while, that I peek into the mainstream culture and go like, okay, what's up with mainstream culture nowadays? Before like diving back into my foxhole here, but I don't know. I've really am starting to get that feeling of like Helm's Deep, like right now, like cultural wise, and I do feel that I don't know, like at Helm's Deep also, like, you know, they lost all hope, but then, you know, the elves appeared, and then finally the Rohirrim and Gandalf came, and I kind of feel like, symbolically speaking, it's like, you know, the elves connected to like more like nature and stuff, and like, you know, the natural world, and this more integrated sense of self, but also like the Rohirrim, like linking to this like masculine energy, and this like I would say like kingly energy is something that, you know, I do feel like is trying to come back, and I do think there's like this slow potential there for this reboot of masculinity. But I do feel like, you know, it's a question, I think, of like, I don't know, like something reawakening this within individuals. And I guess it's through this, like you said, like with Aragorn, Neirum, this I guess facing of hell, or like, you know, this facing of the shadow from a Jungian lens.
Yeah. At a certain point, he realizes it is his responsibility. He doesn't do that for a long time, and he only takes responsibility when he sees that the hobbits are in trouble. He's like, yeah, I gotta help these dudes. They have no idea what's going on, but I do, because I've been out here on my own, you know, flying solo for so long. I've been watching, gathering information, and, you know, maybe he didn't realize it, but his subconscious was like, yeah, dude, you're a king. You have to do this in order to do the right thing. You can't be a part of the culture because it's so corrupt. So you have to be on your own out in the woods, and, you know, make out with the elves and hang out with this nature lady, and try to figure out a new way to take his kingdom, because his kingdom went astray. All the humans, they went in the wrong direction, and he had to seek outside help or outside advice, you know, with the elves, in order to integrate their lessons with humans and move forward in the future. And I think that's what his relationship with Arwen represents. You know, we were talking about that in the God's Wife talk as well. Is there's a lack of the feminine, you know, and when you look at Mother Earth in the context of the Abrahamic religion, Mother Earth is Satan. You know, what if Satan is really a chick, you know, like Mother Earth, and then you have Father Sky, the man up in the sky. And in Lord of the Rings, you know, the kingdom is way up on top of a mountain, you know, and the humans are like trying to reach for the sky. You know, they're trying to do something that nobody's ever done before. They're trying to go beyond the elves, the dwarves, beyond the orcs. They're trying to reach for these lofty ideas, and the elves are like, "No, you humans can't do that. You have to be in harmony with nature." And they're like, "No, but what if we could go to space?" And the elves are like, "We're gonna get on a boat and dip out. Like, you guys are crazy. It's your time. It's the age of man now. The elves are through. We're gonna go off and do our own thing. You know, you guys have fun over here doing your wacky stuff." But one of the elves, Arwen, believes in what they're doing and even loves a man for trying to do it. So she kind of brings him back down to earth a little bit through their relationship, because she's, you know, like Mother Earth, and Aragorn is like Father Sky. Because when they get married, you know, they're up in the clouds, man. They're so high up on that castle, you know, with everybody like having a party, hanging out. So there's this lady from the forest climbing to the top of the mountain to marry the man in the sky.
That's quite poetic how you put it there, Neirum.
Oh, well, thanks, man.
That's I've never thought about it like that till you said this. I never thought about it like that, but it makes a lot of sense, thinking about coming from the forest, going up to the... now that makes a lot of sense. I mean, seriously, Tolkien just blows one away every single time. There's always this little nuggets in there that just makes you go like, wait, what?
Yeah, like, what are they doing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. That's absolutely wild. But yeah, I don't know. But you know, coming back to like the king archetype, and you know what we were talking about, like, you know, about like Aragorn and Arwen. I don't know. I do think that's also a very important factor in that as well. Is this you know, like, because you know he even though he starts off alone as Strider, he you know, he does start this relationship with Orwen eventually, even though, you know, first he you know, hangs out with the hobbits and Gimli and Legolas. I do feel like there's this like progression there where he, you know, like where he goes from this more like hero figure eventually towards more you know, to this king figure, where, you know, he's also kind of like, I guess, gradually getting to that point where he then you know, gets together with Orwen. And I kind of feel like in a modern and a practical sense, it kind of touches upon something that I think in another talk we you know, we touched upon, regarding this need to first start like slow with like, you know, interactions with people and interacting with them and build up towards like a relationship.
Yeah. Well, I think it's absolutely necessary to do it in the order presented in Lord of the Rings. Like, no man can just set out when they're 18 and build a kingdom. You have to go out on your own. You got to leave. You got to not have anybody. You got to test yourself. Like, what can I do by myself with no army, no people, you know, like wiping my ass and feeding me grapes? Like, what can I literally do out here in the woods alone? And I think when Aragorn, you know, got his confidence, figured out he doesn't need anybody. He wants to be around people. He doesn't need the kingdom. He wants it. And I think when he got to that point, he was ready.
I think so. And I think that's also an important realization with the king archetype, like what you pointed out there, Neirum, regarding that yeah, it's not, because it very much, you know, like in the first episode, like what I mentioned, it's very much about needing it, but about indeed wanting it, and it's about something like higher than just it becomes higher than just Aragorn himself. And I think that also touches upon that in a practical sense, what we talked about with, you know, with the God's wife talk as well, about like, you know, there needs to be something higher in a relationship and in, I guess, the within the kingdom, for the kingdom to work, like something above above just the either the king or the queen separately.
Yes. Yeah, you can't be how do I put this? You can't be born into a king. You have to be made into a king, and it has to be by your own hand. Nobody can give you a crown. Like, and I think that's what happened with, England and all these other places. It became so corrupt and nasty because these kings were not making themselves. People were just crowning them and saying, oh yeah, you're this bloodline, and their bloodline became so incest because they thought that everybody else was unclean, impure, so they only had sex with their own family members, that they developed like this strange thing where if they got a paper cut, the royalty would bleed to death and die. They became so fragile, they could not exist outside the castle. And it all fell apart, and we came over here to America and had a good time.
But yeah, I don't know. I think that also like ties into within the more like proto-Indo-European, but also the very early Indo-European like traditions. The king would not always be like this fixed figure, but would be a figure that is kind of like in that sense chosen, and and that figure is chosen based on their qualities. It's also connected to like them being like whole, or like and I guess in that sense, like I guess the sense of wholeness was also connected to like that they genuinely are out for the good of the land, the good of the people and their kingdom, but at the same time, they're respectful of the land and the feminine at the same time as well. And and if the king wouldn't be doing that, then the king would be seen as not whole, because they would distort stuff, and then the king would have to be replaced, or if
it's kind of crazy here in America. Like, we had this whole like revolutionary war to get away from kings and family dynasties. And you fast forward to now, we've done the exact same thing. Like, you look at the Bush family, like, people like elected the Bush Jr. just because his dad was the president. Like, they had more trust in that guy because of his name. And I'm thinking, like, what are we doing? Like, we created America to get away from that, and now you're like going back. What is wrong with everybody? Same with the Clintons. Like, Bill Clinton was a president, and then everybody naturally was like, oh, his wife would be a really good president, and everybody's like wanting to elect her and stuff. And then you have the Kennedy family, like John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
Oh, he's so cool. Look at Ted Kennedy and his brother and Robert Kennedy. Like, oh, let's elect them. Like, oh, they're for sure like going to be the best leaders. Like, what makes you think that? Like, all of human history says otherwise. Everybody, like, what are you talking about? So that's very interesting to me as well. Like, is this natural to want to follow a family dynasty and get to a point of stagnation every time? Like, why can't we break out of that? What is with that sort of trust fall that we have with family dynasties? It always ends up in a dead end.
I don't know. I guess to some degree, it's more familiar, and I guess it represents some sense of security or stability to people. But then at the same time, I guess like if there's a fear that if like the someone would have to how to choose, I guess, the right person, or like trust in that. But I guess it's more about like a trust in that particular process. But
yeah,
I don't know. But in the ancient sense, being a king, meant more than just getting a title or just getting a crown. There was so much ritual and so much more to it in the ancient sense. You can bring up like Marduk, for instance, but also think about like the myth of King Arthur, or or like, you know, a lot of other myths surrounding it as well. You know, in the European cultures, it's, you know, they always go through these particular journeys, and they face these particular things. It's even with the pharaohs in Egypt, like, you know, being this embodiment of Horus, and like having to go. I don't know. It's like, you know, there's this sense of having to grow, to go through this process of, from a Jungian lens, this integration of the shadow, and very much becoming this like full expression of oneself, where one then can, you know, like tap into this king archetype in its like healthy full expression, that can only come about through having, you know, to face these different things, so one is able to, I don't know, see the world more clearly. And I think it's very important with that as well. It's to be able to,
Yes.
because the king, I mean, in the sense of like the king as leader is supposed to be able to see these patterns, is supposed to be able to tap into these things, so that you know, he is aware of what's happening on a deeper level with his kingdom, with the people that are there, so that then he can better navigate things. So he's not like, I guess, thrown about by like the more surface level things, the more like, you know, and he can start to understand like, I guess what is going on. I mean, obviously, you know, like kings would have counselors, like, you know, like King Arthur had Merlin, but it's still, I think, about this being able to see clearly, and to deal with that and go through these stages.
Yeah, there's a really good song talking about what you're saying. I'm looking up the lyrics right now. I want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because I can't quite remember all the lyrics, but it's a song by In Flames, and it's called "The Quiet Place." And I resonated with this song a lot when I was a teenager. So basically, I don't know. Yeah, this is a long song. I'll just give you the gist of it. Basically, it's about this man that is unsure of himself. There's too much noise in the world. There's all these opinions of what these people think and these people say, trying to make you into something they want. And so this man is like seeking the quiet place, you know, where he can think. And that quiet place is within his own mind. So the song talks about him fighting his own demons, drowning the monsters in his own mind, and making it quiet. And there's this line that resonated with me. And I'll read this little part. It says, "Judge me now. Used to be afraid to let it show. Bow down. I am now a great king in my own mind. Everything's in place, so much brighter from today. A king in my own mind." And I think that's the first step. You have to make a quiet place in your mind and be the king of it before you can project that out into your own reality. Like, get your own house, find your queen. You have to have a quiet place in your mind to think and understand what the next move is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and I think that, you know, like the song is also pointing out, and, you know, which aligns with Jungian thought as well, is that, you know, you have to first face these things, face these demons, and face these inner things to get to that point where, you know, you are in that sense the king of your own mind, you know, and I think like only like that can one really truly embody, you know, the king archetype itself, like truly. You can see that, like, you know, like how we were saying too about like Aragon having to face all these different things too. Like I think he got to that point too. I mean, think about like Helm's Deep, where he was to like Theoden, about facing them.
Yes.
To face the Urukai, you know, and it takes. I mean, it shows like how fearless he was to face death in that sense.
Yeah, well, when you do become a king, you realize there are many other things worse than death, such as losing your dignity, betraying your own moral code you've created for yourself and your kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is better to die on your feet than live on your knees. I mean, I would argue all the time it's better to, die on your feet than live on your knees. But some people, don't believe that.
Well,
And
I think I just want to add that into it. It takes also a certain amount of courage that one cultivates to get to that point, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to get to the point where there are things worse than death. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn talks about that in the Gulag Archipelago when he was thrown into a gulag in Soviet Russia. He realized that the reason that communism took his country by storm was because people were terrified to die. And since they were terrified to die, they were controlled, manipulated, thrown into concentration camps, killed in front of people, starved to death, because they didn't have the courage to grab the AK-47 and mow down as many bad guys as possible and get took out and inspire the next man to pick up the rifle that fell and continue the fight. Like, the spirit was gone. And Solzhenitsyn said, if only everybody would have hid in their homes with pitchforks and hammers and bashed the brains in of the Soviet soldiers, it would have never happened. But each man in his household did not believe he was a king. He believed that it was better to live on his knees than die on his feet. And slowly over years, they watched their family die, be, assaulted, raped, starved to death, killed. And Solzhenitsyn made the point, it would have been much better for us to die than to live like this, like animals in the mud. And that really stuck with me. I was like, whoa. Yeah, that is how that happens. We have to get past that. We have to be kings in our own homes and hide in the shadows with hammers and pitchforks if anybody comes after us.
I mean, in the Soviet Union sense, like something like that, like a dictatorship or anything on along those lines. Probably in other contexts, I don't know. Just wanted to add that.
No, yeah, you're right. Yeah. You don't want to do that with your family or your wife or your kids, but yeah, if there are bad guys knocking on your door, be hiding in that shadow with a hammer and bash their fucking brains in, man, because they're gonna throw you in a camp and they're gonna erode your soul to where you hate yourself. You're disgusted with yourself that you've allowed your family to end up here. And it would be much better if you all fought together and died and your spirit remained and your legacy was preserved. Like, your neighbors would see you fight and die, and that spirit would live in them, and they would be like, yeah, that is the better way to go out. I'm going to go out that way. That dude, that family fought with courage and with hope and light in their heart. And I want to do that. It inspires people when you see that. Like that guy in Tiananmen Square. He stood in front of the tanks and he said, no. And they ran him over. But that inspired the entire world to be like, yeah, I wish I had the courage to do that.
I don't know. I think in another sense regarding the king archetype, in a, I guess, less brutal sense. I think if we just take it into like a more everyday context, I could also, I don't know, I would also say this sense of inspiration cannot just come from like such like courageous acts in such dire situations, but also from trying to embody the king archetype, and like what figures such as Aragorn kind of like represent into, you know, in one's own life, and to be led and inspired by an archetype like this, and to tap into that like archetypal force and what it represents, and try to very much like, you know, work on that, and to face one's fears, to slowly push one's boundaries. And I think that's also very much, you know, part of it, because I mean, Aragorn did not, you know, for instance, get to that point and at Helm's Deep just out of nowhere. He you know, like lived in the wild. He continuously had to probably push his boundaries to get to that point where he was at Helm's Deep. But the thing is that you know, I think like acts like that in like a modern practical sense ends up inspiring others around oneself if one does that, to you know, embody that, so that people see that like, hey, wait, like this dude is like embodying some like energy that's very like vibes very well and just feels right. And I think people can pick up on that. I truly think so. And I think that if anyone that is listening, you know, gets inspired by this and feels like, yeah, like I can do that. You know, like, do know that just trying to do that will end up inspiring others around one. And I think that's that right there is the very powerful thing in that.
Yes. I think a modern example of what you're talking about is the TV show Yellowstone. It's become a wildly popular television show that spun off into 2 other spin-offs. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with the Yellowstone story or the people listening, but I'll just give you a quick rundown. It's about these people that live in, you know, I think it's Montana. And back in the 1800s, this guy's family, you know, went through the Oregon Trail from New York all the way out, and they were trying to make it to the coast, but they didn't end up making it that far. They got as far as Montana. They didn't make it to Oregon. And so they, out of circumstance, I don't want to spoil it for anybody if you want to watch it, but out of circumstance, they decided, you know, the divine or God has decided this is our new home. And they make a home there back in like 1886. And as soon as they get the land, as soon as they create their kingdom, everybody's trying to take it from them. Everybody wants their shit. They're like, how about you sell this acre to us and this bit? And then the family's like, no, not a single inch. None of it. Get out. Okay, we're going to take it from you. And then they have to go to war. And that's what it's all about. That show is about this family since the 1800s trying to preserve every single acre of their land from the government, the companies, nasty farmers next to them, people, you know, sending their cattle over there, eating their grass to where their cattle can't eat it. Then they have to build a fence all the way around the property. Then people cut the fence and you know. So it's like for over 100 years, this family has managed to preserve every acre of their land, whereas all the other families fell. The railroad got them, the government got them, the neighbor killed them, you know, all this stuff. So they decide, you know, we have to become the leaders here and help all the other little kingdoms. So they like elect this guy. His name's like John Dutton. He said, they're like, you have to be, I can't remember what it's called, like a farming commissioner, like the guy that the guy that's in charge of land management and figuring out, you know, the right thing to do. Like, say for instance, somebody does send their cattle onto your property and eats up your grass or destroys part of your land. He's the guy that legally decides, like, is the judge for the farmlands. You owe this guy this much money. Here's your penalty. Do it. And he tries to preserve everybody else's land because he doesn't want to take anybody else's land. He's not out to conquer people. He's out to preserve other people's lands. He's friends with people, and people realize this about him, and that's what makes him a wonderful leader. He's preserving his own land, and through example, he's showing other people how to do it. And there's instances in the show where all the farmers band together to fight evil or a big corporation or the government. And the show's a big hit. I see a lot of people in my community, I do live in the country, with like Yellowstone stickers on their truck, or they're wearing a shirt, or it says like Dutton Ranch. Like it's taken people by storm, this sense. And I think that's mainly because we don't have a modern example of what it is to be a king, what it is to preserve what is yours, and how to help your neighbors and be a good neighbor. And it hits all those marks, and I think it really inspires people.
I think also that it very much, like connects very well to the King archetype, and like how I talked about it, and the last episode regarding that. Because I don't know, it's because he then doesn't just do it for himself. He ends up doing it for others as well, and that right there is the King archetype. And I think that's why it is speaking to people, because it's the kind of archetype that it's not really shown that much in that form anymore, and we're not really in the modern sense embodying that a lot. But it is the full expression of the masculine archetype, and when it comes to that, it is important to detangle the King archetype from the historical constraints that it is in, and realize that one can embody that oneself, and give it practical applications in one's life, and like how you were saying, that it can lead to the inspiration of like how in the show others were then also able to preserve their land.
Yes. Yeah, because who wants to be in charge of the world, man? Like it's hard enough to manage your own property, especially if it's like 1,000 acres. So the John Dutton guy, he realizes like, yeah, we have to band together so that each person can have their kingdom, and we can have society. So we can have peace, so that one man isn't doing everything, and that's a critical part of the show.
And I think there's, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, because I really don't think that it's possible for a singular person to be able to micromanage anything to that level, or even that it would be beneficial to do so. I think it also comes to, when it comes to the King archetype, about understanding that I guess this trust that you start to have in others, but it is something that is cultivated, and it is through example and through building relationships, and and working on that it gets to that point. Much like going back to Aragon, like how he built these relationships with those in the Fellowship, where first he was alone, and it's through building the trust that he got to the point where he's at. He didn't do it alone. Gandalf was there, and the hobbits, but also Gimli and Legolas.
He had his dream team. Or his D&D party. He had a wizard and an elf and a dwarf and a hobbit. Yeah, and he realized, we had to all work together. Not only did he realize, each of them individually realized, we have to have a fellowship. We have to work together. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. And that's our advantage, is the diversity between all of our different individuated paths is the only way we're going to defeat evil. Because the bad guys, all they had were orcs. You know, there were no dark elves hanging out with them, no dark hobbits, no dark humans. It was just the orcs, you know, made out of the mud of the earth, you know, grown in those weird pods.
Yes.
Ooh, they're pod babies, like the Australian pods they're making babies out of. That's what the Sauron is. That's their kingdom. They don't have children. They grow their babies out of pods ready to fight. I didn't realize that till just now, but that's exactly what the evil Mordor people do. They grow babies out of pods. They have no love.
But you know, the thing with this also is I just lost my train of thought there. It's because of the babies out of pods.
Sorry, man.
It's okay. I'll get my train of thought back. But anyways, yeah. But you know, throughout the entire story of Lord of the Rings, what I can say is, you know, like that essence becomes clear. And yeah, you were talking about the different individuated individuals and their different paths, and I think that right there is key. Indeed key in defeating evil, or like to overcome from Jungian lens the shadow in both the personal but also in a collective sense. It's through you know, embodying this and overcoming these aspects of the shadow that then one can start to inspire others to do the same, you know, and by overcoming the shadow, you know, like I said, you go from the divine child to the hero to the king, and it's these stages that one goes through, and it's by going through these stages and working towards embodying this like full expression of the self, and you know, with that the king archetype, or for women the queen archetype, that then one, you know, it starts to rub off on others, and it becomes a source of inspiration for others, and it starts to affect one's surroundings, you know. And the thing is, like, does it change large scale things or anything? I mean, no, not really, but not in the immediate sense would it do anything like that. But I do think the important thing is that bit by bit, it starts to, the very least, it allows individuals to individuate and to build their own kingdom. And I think that that right there is the most important thing, that it is possible. I mean, that there are individuals that would be doing that, and would be able to have their kingdom, their family, their life, and live it how they see fit, while thinking about you know, the well-being of their family, but also the whole, so they can work well together with the other kingdoms.
Right. Yeah, it's one thing, and maybe we should do a part 3 on this, of what I'm about to say, but yeah, we're talking about the beginning and creation of a kingdom, but how do you preserve one? You know, how do you, like, I was just thinking about Lord of the Rings at the end, like, does the Fellowship ever hang out again? You know, the whole reason that they culminated to the moment of success was together. So, do you need to maintain that fellowship in order to preserve the kingdom? I think you do. Because I see a lot of people, you know, get married, have their own house, have their kids. They never talk to their friends again because they're quote unquote too busy. And what ends up happening is a lot of people get divorced. It destroys their kingdom. It's torn asunder. The kids are messed up. The parents fight. the kids don't know who to live with, the mother or the father, so they switch. Live with the dad sometimes, live with the mother sometimes. So how do you maintain the kingdom once you have it? I think that's the real problem. I think we see a lot of people, or parents, unable to maintain the kingdom, and that's caused this malaise in society of like, why should I try? It's impossible. It can't be done. I've never seen an example of it. Nobody can maintain their kingdom. So how do you preserve that once you have it? What is the right protocols or set of things to do? And I think one of the critical things is who the people you hang out with and the adventures you go on can never stop. When you have a kingdom and you have children and a queen, it is critical on the weekend to go out with your friends and do the stuff you used to do that made you into the person your wife fell in love with. I think what happens is men particularly become stagnant, they become boring, they become uninteresting because they work. That becomes their priority. And what they end up losing is their soul. They sacrifice too much to where they are no longer spiritually present. Their wife doesn't respect them, the kids don't look up to them, and it becomes a whirlwind of confusion. But anyway, that's probably for a whole other topic. But
I can already bring up something regarding that, and maybe we can maybe bring it up again in the maybe God's wife part 2, maybe, because it's
for sure.
I feel like it would fit well into that, but yeah, no, I kind of feel like like what you said is very much is a very good point, that there very much is a need for that, and also symbolically from like the mythological lens, what I talked about in the previous episode was about this sense of wholeness that is needed to embody the King archetype. And I think that right there is key. It's because, the King archetype in that sense is connected to the self and it's connected to the soul. And if you start to have to repress these different parts of the soul of oneself, and like you said, Neirum, to do work, and you lose this connection to these deeper parts of oneself, then you start to lose that. You start to lose the King archetype. You start to lose this embodied spiritual presence that you mentioned. And I think that when that happens, then it's kind of what in these stories, the king is then symbolically replaced by this weak, mean king that is then is not like it's not really like a good king for his kingdom. And I think I think in that sense they symbolically also represented with that kind of what happens if the king loses his soul. If he starts to lose it generates this resentment, and that's symbolized by this like mean, weak king.
Yeah, it's important to preserve the power of saying no. And I see a lot of married men lose that power. I think they believe they have to agree with everything their wife says, everything their boss says, and they effectively become, a slave. They are not powerful. Sure, they have a house, they have kids, they have a wife. Nobody respects them. Everybody just always has their hand out, waiting for the money, waiting for the food, and it's expected. It's not respected. Because I think these men, and I think it has a lot to do with our laws, and divorce court, usually punishes the man and rewards the woman, which has also made it a raw deal for everybody, where most people don't want to do it anymore. Because I think even before when you do have a good relationship and you enter into marriage in the West, something psychologically changes where the men understand the women have all the power to destroy your life, destroy your kingdom, on a whim. They can just go down to the courthouse and file and cause a whirlwind of shit. And, you know, get the kids taken, get you to pay alimony, get you to pay child support. And there's not a whole lot a man can do to stop it. So I think that's why a lot of people have stopped even having sexual relations with anybody. They don't even date. People are hiding. And it's similar to that utopian mouse experiment where, you know, you give the mice infinite food, infinite shelter, infinite water. There's no predators chasing after them. They're not in survivor mode. They're on easy street. And what happened in the utopian mouse experiment is the women started to become vicious and attack and kill the men. And they couldn't breed anymore. They couldn't have little mouse babies anymore because the women became so vicious because they were on easy street. Interesting, right? So what the male mice do is they dig underneath the wood chips on the floor of the experiment, and they hide and seal the entrance back up. And all the men are underground, hiding. And all the women are left up on the surface with no men to fight. So what do? The women start killing each other over food, over a place to sit, over the water little sipper thing. And eventually all the female mice kill each other off or starve. And the male mice remain. And what they did, they didn't become homosexual, but they did start grooming themselves. And that was the role that the women had. The women would groom the men. But since the women went crazy, the men groomed each other and abstained from sex. And when all the women died and it was quiet, those male mice slowly came out of the surface. They like uncovered their entrances because they sealed them. That's what's interesting. They sealed the entrances behind them. They were afraid of the women. So when they didn't hear any noise, they came back up to the surface like to check it out. And then the males came back out to the surface to eat the food and stuff. But eventually when they died of old age, the entire society collapsed and there was nobody left to continue the mouse generation. I think that's what's happening right now. I don't know. I don't have a solution. I don't know what to do about it, but I see that happening. You know, I see women, when things don't go exactly their way, when a man does say no and asserts that king vibe, women go right down to the courtroom, file for divorce, file for custody of the children, and we have seen time and time again the man lose, and that it's basically impossible to create this kingdom that we're talking about because it's a imbalance of power. Now, with that said, there are very good reasons that those laws were put into place. You know, like for instance, a man would get a woman pregnant and take off, and then the child would suffer. So we created child support laws and stuff like this. But I think it's gone so off the rails that it's discouraging people to get married anymore. So how do you deal with that? How do you balance that out? What do we do about that? That could be a part 3. I know that's a whole other rabbit hole.
That's a whole other rabbit hole for sure. I don't know. I kind of feel. I don't know. I don't know if there's like anything one can do on the level of like I don't know. I guess a societal level. I don't know. Probably not. But I don't know. I kind of feel with that I guess it's about I guess a shift in perspective for both men and women alike. That is more like personal, where one starts to realize like I don't know, like there needs to be this investment in the kingdom coming from both. That is beyond just either one's ego or anything like that. That it's about something like bigger than that. About bigger than like, oh well, it's like, yeah, I don't know, about like egoic like needs or anything. It's like it's nothing wrong with having needs or wants or anything, but I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe like we lost sight of that because marriage wasn't just about about, I don't know, it wasn't just about a man and a woman coming together and for kids and that kind of stuff. It's like, does it play a part in it? Yes, but there's some more symbolic element to it that I feel is missing, which is linked to this idea of there being something more transcendent there, that it's not just about even like like, to give an example, the woman and the man, and for instance, or just about the child, but it's about the man and the woman and the child or the children, and even like bigger than that something that transcends that. And I feel that in the past, people had this idea, this legacy, this bigger picture in mind, where I feel, I don't know, like in some cases now, it's like I kind of feel like this transcendent idea of there being something bigger there in in a relationship or marriage seems to be lost. But I guess it's also about having to find that, and finding someone that's compatible, and I guess has this shared transcended goal, or like something bigger than just, I guess, surviving or just gorging oneself on food, like the mice experiment or anything like that. There's something more there. I think that's on a personal level. That's done, like only people can determine what the fuck that goal is. But I do feel that I feel that that's one big key in it.
Yeah, we need a new story to tell, or go back in the past and cherry pick the critical things that are rational, that work, that are applicable, and embody that story, share that story. We do not have a shared story anymore. There's 100 different ways people can do a relationship, and that's the question: is there more than one way to do it? And if there is, what are those ways? Is there a limit to those ways? What are our biological hard limits? What is our archetypical limits? That might be a better way to put it. What are our archetypical limits of the stories that we should be telling ourselves that will not lead us astray, straight into chaos, straight into loneliness, straight into despair, and evil psychopaths controlling you, like in Soviet Russia or communist China? I think it's because they were telling themselves the wrong stories, and it allowed that evil, the kingdom of Mordor, if you will, to dominate everything and everyone, because they didn't have any kingdoms to defend themselves. They didn't have that spirit. They didn't have a quiet place in their own mind to figure out, okay, this is bad. I need to go talk to my neighbor. We need to band together for the sake of all our kingdoms and fight this thing. They didn't have the proper story to tell themselves.
I don't know, like I don't know what the exact answer for that is, but I do know that even though, like, this, like, I guess, transcendent idea would be something very personal. I do think, like, I don't know, it's something the very least to think about, and, like, what that would be for oneself, for, I guess, for both men and women, to realize that this, like, because I don't know, I do also I don't know, I feel that because that's the capacity that we have as humans that mice don't have. We have the capacity to tell ourselves stories, to tell ourselves, and to tap into these archetypal patterns in a way that like, mice can't. And I think that's the way that how we can get out of that, and how we can, like, that it doesn't have to be doomed like the mice, because there's more than biology at play. There's the archetypal layer, and there's the mythological layer, and and there's these stories that we can tell each other that inspire and uplift each other, and very much like could inspire us in that way to. But yeah, that's how it exactly would look like. I don't know. I think it's very personal, those kind of stories, and I do feel like we it's about I don't know, like asking those questions ourselves and to figure that out for ourselves. Because I think that there's, I don't know, there are like archetypal patterns playing out, and like biological patterns, and there's like certain things playing out for sure, and I don't know, and it's unsure like how far those limits go, or like and what works and what does not work. But I do think that we can figure these things out collectively, and to by asking those questions, and to actually see within ourselves, like, well, what is this? What is this thing? Like, what are we here for in a relationship beyond just being together or just having kids? It's not that that's not important, but it's. I don't think personally that that's like looking at like the historical idea of marriage, that that's not what kept the marriage together per se. Like having kids or just wanting to be together. There's something more there.
Sorry about that. My phone died. I don't know if you saw me.
Yeah, I saw you leave.
Okay.
I was just telling about just saying about like the that there was something more there in the past regarding marriage than just being together, or just being about kids. That there was like this shared idea, or this shared dream that they had beyond just.
Yeah, like I resonated a lot with the TV show Vikings, because that's exactly what happened between Lagertha and Ragnar. Like, Ragnar looked up to Odin, Lagertha looked up to Freya, and they, and their son Bjorn, was like Thor. He became this real big, strong dude that fought many great battles. But yeah, and I think that's how they had a good relation. In the end, they ended up splitting up and things like this, but they always respected each other, and they always loved each other, and they always tried to do the best thing for their kids. They had a story to tell themselves, and that was critical, because it even kept them together after they were apart. They still interacted with each other because of that shared story. They tried not to be so bitter about it after a time, because the whole point of why they broke up was Lagertha was unable to have kids, and there was this whole thing between them where Bjorn, their son, you come to find out that is not Ragnar's son, that's his brother Rollo's son that banged her. So there's this whole weirdness underneath. And when he found out she could not have kids anymore, he got with a woman that could, and gave him Uba and Sigurd, and
Yes.
all these other kids. The snake in the eye guy. But anyway, he had to do that because he was making a kingdom, and if he didn't have any more kids, it was over. And that's a very unfortunate thing. There was an opportunity where Lagertha could have been, his first wife, and the second lady could have been his second wife, and they could have, lived together out of that necessity. But her being the embodiment of Freya, her ego couldn't do it. She was like, no, it's only me or nothing. Even though in the reality of things, she was not able to be what he needed her to be. So that was a very interesting dynamic. It's not like he cheated on her because he just wanted to. It was a necessity to create and further his kingdom. And because, everybody was trying to kill his son, and, his son, eventually did die. And if he did not go and get a second wife, his bloodline would have been terminated. So that didn't happen, Ubo went on to discover Canada and hang out with the Native Americans, and he found Floki later on, and that whole thing would have never happened if the morality wasn't tested. And I found that fascinating when you see the whole thing from a bird's eye view. But I think it was because they had a story they were telling. They understood deeply the necessity of certain things, and wouldn't let dogma or set in stone morality get in the way of pivoting in order to open up the future.
I don't know. I think in that sense that yeah, it's part of it, this shared story. But I think at the same time, beyond that, I think it's also about being able to understand, I guess, each other, to have this deeper understanding. And I think it also has a lot to do with, I guess, being able to, relate to each other and have this capacity to I don't know. I kind of like, yeah, that's one thing too, and it's like from a Jungian lens that comes into like the anima and the animus, and it's the symbolically this inner masculine figure or guide, but but it's very much about being able to relate to others, and I think coming back to that again, I think that relating to others is something that is cultivated, and it's cultivated through interaction and cultivated through introspection as well, to become aware of one's behaviors and like why am I behaving this way? Why are they behaving this way? And to cultivate this awareness of these dynamics that play out. And I think that's also very important to understand, because in a modern context, there's a lot of people that have like these, if one would bring in like attachment styles, which is like a psychological model to look at like the way like we relate to each other. I think looking at that and bringing that into it, I think there's a lot to learn from that, where one can become aware of these patterns and not to judge, but to understand where the other person is coming from in the relationship, so that one can approach it with more compassion. Like like a lot of those insecure like attachment types, they generally tend to come from like stuff from like childhood or something that like went wrong, or they were bullied, or any form of like childhood trauma, and like the way their parents treated them or something. And that has effects on how they relate now to others, including in a romantic sense. And I think that if people would learn about that and understand that, they can navigate these relationships better, and also decide more like what is what is right, and to do, to be able to like stay true to oneself, but also to understand at the same time where the other person is coming from, and to have this, I guess, like sense of compassion that one can have, so one doesn't become I don't know, like egos don't come into play as much. It's like so then you can start to talk it out, because I think a lot of the times why like and I'm speaking here from experience regarding like relationships with me that like didn't work out. In hindsight, a lot of that I've started to figure out has to do with these attachment patterns and these behaviors. And the thing is that and it's become it's about becoming aware of these, and then being able to talk to the other person and to try to then figure it out. I mean, can you always figure it out? No. Sometimes one is just not compatible with someone, or like you didn't go in the relationship for the right reasons, which can suck. And it doesn't always, but it gives one the opportunity, if one is compatible with the person and you went into for the right reasons and you love each other, to work these things out, so that then it doesn't get to the point of resentment or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's what Lagtha did. In the end, like, she understood it was nothing personal about what Ragnar did. It wasn't like, oh, I hate you, I reject you. Like, he loved her. He wanted to keep her around. He didn't, and he cried, and he was very upset when she left, because he was torn between the divine, which, Odin and everybody wanted him to have more kids. And I think they sent that woman in the night underneath the tree. I think they called it the tree of life or something, or I'm not sure, but they sent this woman in the middle of the night while he was sleeping to basically, get on top of him and just start banging him while he was half asleep. So it wasn't even his idea. It just happened. And there's this beautiful woman on top of you, and this is happening, and she wants to have your kid. So it's this whole, like, did God send you? Like, did Odin send you? Like, is this? And who are you to question that? Who are you to say no to that? I think is what he was thinking in his head. And of course, Agatha was like, fuck you, this is shit. And what does she do? Her and her son that she had by Rollo, Bjorn, take off. So that bloodline that's not even Ragnar's leaves. But Bjorn is very much in the spirit Ragnar's son. And never really with Rollo at all, his actual father. So there's a lot of moving parts in there going on. Ragnar raised Bjorn as his own son, and Lagertha kind of understood this, but when it came time for her to do that, like Ragnar did, she didn't do it. So who is the more moral character, really, in that? And I also would like to bring up, in light of this, Carl Jung's morality, because I didn't know this for a while until I dove into the personal life of Carl Jung. He dated his patients. Like, he had sexual relations with his patients in mental hospitals, like the females. And this is a big reason why Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud stopped being friends. Freud called him out publicly and was like, this is immoral, this is wrong. And they kicked him out of the psychological community for this reason. But what was the effect? Carl Jung enters into these relationships with these crazy women, and what ends up happening is they get better. Like, they're not crazy anymore. They leave the mental hospital. He helps this girl get an apartment, and he starts teaching her about psychology, and they're having all this crazy sex. Like, she was this one particular lady, she was a Jewish lady, and he was like an Aryan, like a German. And this was before the whole Nazi thing, but during their sex, they would call this out, as because they felt the tension between the Jewish people and the Germans, and they said that basically this made their sex hotter. They were like, "Ooh, this is so forbidden. We're not supposed to be doing this," and they dove deep in. Yeah, they dove deep into that shadow of the collective unconscious of this act between these two people that are not supposed to like each other, but they had a love and they built something constructive out of it. Long story short, this lady decides to leave and go to college because she becomes so much better and not crazy anymore. She goes off and gets her PhD in psychology, and she marries another man and has her own family. And this family comes to his house and has like picnics with him and his wife. And Carl Jung's wife knows fully like what happened, everything, but she's cool with it. He's cool with it. That lady's husband is cool with it, because what was the goal? Carl Jung wasn't just trying to, get laid. He figured the only way to help people is you have to become personally involved. You have to become a part of their life. You have to become a part of their story. And he did this. He embodied it, and that was the main reason he got kicked out of all these prestigious circles of thought. Is because he got down in the mud and he figured it out, and he actually helped people. And it was generally accepted by his own wife and the husband of the women that he did this with in the past, because it made them whole. It gave them a future. So, is it wrong what he did? I don't know. Did it help? Absolutely.
That's just I knew about I knew about that already for a while, but yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's totally true about Carl Jung.
Yeah, it's tricky dicky stuff, man. Like,
Yeah.
what do you do? What's right? What's wrong? Suffice to say, Ragnar knew he was a king. He had a quiet place in his own mind. And I think that was true with Carl Jung as well. Like it or not, he had a kingdom. He had a system of morality. He had a system of beliefs. And I think that's why we still talk about Carl Jung today.
That's a good point. It's a good point.
I don't know if a king is either good or bad. Just like we were talking about Star Wars earlier, the story of Darth Revan. He was neither good or bad in the end, but he was certainly a king that people respected and people followed.
Yeah, and when it comes to Revan, but also the king archetype from the Proto-Indo-European lens, these like Revan as a character, but also the Proto-Indo-European king, and this archetype represents the self from a Jungian lens, and the self is beyond dark and light. So like Revan. So there, and that's the whole, I guess, tricky part of it. It's not just light. It's not just, so it becomes very, I guess, contradictory in that sense for most people.
Yeah, like if we lived in the sun all day, the earth would be a desert and we'd all be dead. If it was night all the time, we would be frozen and everybody would be dead. We have to have the cycle of light and dark in order to have anything at all. And I think that's the whole story of Star Wars. The Jedi are trying to live under the sun all day, and it burned up everything else that was necessary for life to go on. And that's where the Sith come in. They're the night. They're like, okay, here we go. This is what we think. And it destroyed them both, because either one of them didn't understand the necessity for either. For the light and the dark, for the sun and the moon, for the twilight.
Yeah, it's And I think this very much is also like, plays out not just symbolically like that, but also it's like, this idea of the Goldilocks zone too, like where Earth is in. It's right there in this particular zone. It's not too cold, it's not too hot. It's right
Right.
there in the middle. And
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of pattern that plays out on both like a grand cosmic scale, but also in 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 a way more like personal scale as well within life. And I think it's always about finding this right balance. And I think
Yeah.
in also in relationships and in one's kingdom as well, it's all about finding this balance. And I think that's like, how we were talking about it also, and where's God's wife talk as well. It's also about finding this balance, in within the kingdom between the king and the queen, but something that's out where both sides are equal in that matter.
Yeah. Yeah. We dance upon a razor's edge. The earth itself dances upon the razor's edge with our orbit, with the moon being where it is and the sun being where it is and Jupiter doing what it does to catch the comets from hitting us like a defense system.
Yeah.
It's all this very carefully balanced out clockwork. And I think that's beautifully illustrated in the book titled The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham. It's about this man that comes back from the war, and he's questioning, like, what was this worth? Like, his best friend jumps on a grenade to save him and dies, and he keeps thinking, like, that should have been me. I should have died. So he comes back feeling like he's dead and being reborn anew, and he discovers the quiet place in his own mind. His dad wants him to take over the business. He says, no, I need to do my own thing. His fiance says, let's get married and have kids. And he says, no, I'm not ready to do that. Somebody else says, you can't go to France and, do whatever you want. You have responsibilities. Your father, this woman that wants to marry you. And he says, no, it just doesn't feel right. It feels like that's not what I want to do. And so he sets out to figure out, how do I dance upon this razor's edge where everybody else falls to one side or the other? And they fall into war. They fall into hatred. They fall into resentment. He's like, I got to get out of all of this stuff. Like, nobody is trying to dance. They're all trying to sit down.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a really good movie, too, if people don't want to read the book. The Razor's Edge. It's like a 1950s black and white movie. It's a very powerful story centered around what we're talking about, because that man effectively becomes his own king. He doesn't find a queen yet. There's not a part 2 either, or a sequel. But he does. In the end, he does become a king that has his own set of ideas and understands what he has to do for himself.
And I think that's I think from a Jungian lens, that is very much part of what individuation is about. It's about finding this true expression of who one is, to find this to find this quiet space in the mind.
Yeah.
And I think
what do you think? What do you believe? And when you really start questioning that, sometimes that makes people go crazy, man. Like, because they have these other people pulling them, like your parents, your girlfriend or your wife, your kids, your boss, and it becomes impossible. It just drives you nuts, because you're it's like a tug of war. There's all these ropes on your arm, on your neck, on your leg, on your waist, pulling you in every other direction. And there's all this noise inside your head tearing you apart until you cut the rope, you free yourself, and you say, okay, I need to go to a quiet place I need to figure out what I need to be doing and ignore all these people. It's good to take in advice. It's
Oh
good to
yeah.
take in advice,
Oh yeah.
and consider and have friends and
Hmm.
talk, like we're talking here. Because neither one of us is like trying to put a lasso around us and convince anybody of one thing or another. Like, oh, you're wrong. This is the way. I see that happen so many times on other YouTube channels and in Discords, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah. No.
that's not nice. That's not friendly.
No, it's not. But in that sense, it's also, I think it's also very important to, for well, I guess everyone, and that includes myself and like the listeners. It's from a Jungian perspective also very important to know that it's very much about being able to listen to others, but also to stay true to oneself and to know that this journey is one's own journey, and in the end, it's one can't really force anything upon anyone, and it's very much about like one can convey things, but in the end, it's up to every individual to find their own path, to find their
Mm-hmm.
own way. It's like the Knights of the Round Table having they go on their own journey. Like no one tells them where to go and tells them like you like that would be like okay, like Gawain, you have to go there exactly in this forest to find the Holy Grail for yourself. It's like no, Gawain figures that out for himself where he wants to go into the forest, what path he wants to take. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's an important part of all of that. And I think that's the important part of embodying the King archetype as well. To find out, like like how you illustrated that with that story, the Razor's Edge, Neirum.
Yeah, it's the tricky part is, and I'm going to quote something from Frank Herbert's Dune. Um, the God Emperor, Paul II, said, if only people could live long enough to see the patterns play out, they would never follow a leader. They would never take that lasso around the neck and be led around like a dog. Because people often don't look at, that's what history is. That's what our books are. That is the most sacred thing that we have is the written word in truth, in what really happened. And it's difficult to cut through that because, the victor is the one that writes history. The person that wins is the one that burns the books, that smashes the tablets, destroys the statues, and says, "Oh, that never happened. This is what happened." And that's the most dangerous thing, most dangerous threat to all of humanity is this fucking lasso, man. We gotta get rid of that shit. Because that was the whole point of God Emperor of Dune, is he enslaved all of humanity. He put so many ropes and lassos on all their limbs and ripped them apart. He banned reading and writing. He didn't let people think for themselves. And that genetically repressed people to such a point that their genes expressed new code to where they could not listen to leaders anymore. And they started reading and writing in secret, creating their own language and developing their own technology in secret. Little did they know, this is exactly what the God Emperor wanted. This is exactly what Leto II wanted.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, thank God they're rebelling. Thank God they hate me. Oh, great. This is the golden path. They're doing it. And eventually they create these things called no ships, where they can get inside of it, and the God Emperor cannot see, because he's telepathic. He can tell the whole future. He knows everything. So they go so far to create a technology like an interdimensional fold to where he's blind to that. And that elates him. It gives him joy. He is happy about it, because he knows that his reign is almost through. Not only is his reign almost through, everybody's reign is almost through. Leadership, this whole concept of one guy leading all of humanity, becomes impossible because the genetic code of humanity is changed to that extent. They become sick on a cellular level when anybody tells them what to do. And at the end of it, they all get in spaceships and they fly as far away from each other as possible to each star in the galaxy and never talk to each other again. They go on each of them go on their own path of self-individuation and choose a star to go travel to, so nobody can tell them what to do anymore. In a way, I think that's a beautiful ending, because maybe one day they can talk to each other again without lassos.
Yeah, and I think that's very much key about that. Like every star in that sense could represent the person's self in from a Jungian lens, and it's kind of like what the whole goal is of individuation.
Exactly. Yes.
To go on that path, and I think that's the only way, like how to truly embody the King archetype to its full extent, and like what it means. And and then it's about of course about the next part. It's about like finding one's queen and building one's kingdom, but also knowing how to maintain it. And these things take time. And are there are all of the answers out there? No, they're not. And I think it's very much about figuring out these things collectively, like one step at a time. But I do really truly believe that I don't know, humanity is clever enough to figure it out. We can do this. We can do this. We're more clever than mice are. We have we have this ability to figure this thing out. We don't have to go the way of the mouse experiment at all. It's just a question of raising our level of awareness about these things and to figure this thing out for ourselves.
I think that's why that the scene of the Gom Jabbar with the Reverend Mother and Paul is very critical to the whole concept of what we're talking about. She holds this poison needle up to his neck when he sticks his hand in this box that starts burning his flesh off his hand, and he wants to take his hand out of the box, but she puts this poison needle to his neck and says, young Paul Atreides, if you take your hand out of that box, you're no better than an animal, and I'll kill you like one. I'll stick this needle in your neck and kill you if you take your hand out of that box. You're either a human being or you're going to be dead. I'll kill you. And I'm like, whoa, that is profound. She's trying to see if he is a mouse in the utopian mouse experiment or if he is a human being that can change, that can will himself through the pain to become something more than just an animal. And I think we're in that part right now. Maybe we need a Gom Jabbar of some kind in our society. Like, are you able to dance on the razor's edge? Or are you going to fall like all the mice in this utopia we've created? Can you still navigate reality without survivor mode? Can you navigate reality when things are nice? Right now, we cannot. Right? As it is, humans can only navigate in survival mode. It's impossible for us to navigate with everything being so easy. So can we move forward? I don't know. I hope so. I have faith. I have hope that we're going to not take our hand out of the box and we're going to become something more.
I think so. I think that potential is there. And I think I don't know, like that what you said about the hand in the box makes me again. I don't know. It made me again think about like this from Lord of the Rings. This like Helm's Deep. This turning point where we're at, where on an individual level, but a collective level, it's very much about. Like are we gonna give up hope, or are we like embodying this like Aragorn and Theoden, and we're gonna face it head on and sound, sound that horn and face the Urukai right on, trust in that hope. What like what Gandalf, for instance, and also represents there in that scene.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, he comes back no longer gray, but as the White Wizard. Yeah. And when you notice, when he fights the Balrog, he falls and falls and falls. And you know what's weird to me? I've never quite understood this scene.
Mm-hmm.
They fall in the mountain underground, and if they fall so far that they go past the ground and there's another sky, and they fall through the sky and fall upon a mountain and fight. And I'm like, where in the hell is that place? I thought there was lava down there and all this, but then you realize Lord of the Rings takes place on Middle Earth. So that kind of indicates there's a lower Earth and an upper Earth. So Gandalf fell from Middle Earth to lower Earth on another mountaintop underneath and fought this thing, and he came back and rose. I don't know how he got from lower Earth back up to Middle Earth, but he found a way. And when he came back, he was a White Wizard. He integrated the shadow. I think that's what that was representing.
I think no, it does. It does represent exactly that. I think it was he died as Gandalf the Grey on top of that mountain, and then he was resurrected by Iro Iluvatar, so the basically god of Middle Earth, or like
right.
These different realms, and
Mm-hmm.
he's the one that brought him back, and it's kind of like symbolizing the death of the ego and this rebirth where the shadow is integrated, much like how before this live stream started, we were talking about that what you brought up with like Yoda as well.
I was just going to say that, the story of Yoda, how he discovers the secrets of Qui-Gon Jinn to manifest your soul after death, how they become those little blue ghosts on the Ewok planet that hang out with Luke Skywalker, kind of like they're all smiling, nodding their head, and they're there to help him and guide him in case he gets confused. The spirit of the ancestors lives on, not through books that people can twist and contort with propaganda, but the literal life force of the people of the past is how the Star Wars story moves forward. Nobody can destroy that. How are you going to go kill Yoda, Obi-Wan, and, Anakin? They're dead already. Their information lives on forever now, and that was Yoda's primary goal. That's the breaking of the cycle. At least in that story. I have no idea how we could literally do that. Maybe there's a way to tap into your genetic memory, for all I know. I don't know exactly, but it's a very interesting take on it.
Yeah, I don't know. In that sense, I think it also very much. I don't know, with Yoda, like how we talked about, it taps into again the integration of the shadow, and I think from if we would take that with like Windhorse and the subtle body into it, already a little bit.
Yeah,
it ties
like when
into yeah.
Sorry, man. I just want to say real quick. It's kind of like when Obi-Wan, after he dies, and Luke is, attacking the Death Star, and he gets into the trench, and he's relying on his targeting computer to hit that mark. But Obi-Wan says to him in the afterlife, through death, he says, "Luke, use the Force, Luke. Use it." And Luke is like, "Huh? What? Oh, okay." And he turns the targeting computer off. And everybody's freaking out, like, Luke just turned his targeting computer off. What's he doing? And then somebody's like, no, he believes. Like, let it go. Don't yell at him. He's concentrating through the radio. So he uses the Force, he concentrates, but it would have never been possible if Obi-Wan didn't have this ability that he learned from Yoda, that Yoda learned from Qui-Gon, for them to reach out to their descendants, to their students, to the people that they love. Because Luke, what could he do? Like, if he had a Bible in his cockpit, he didn't have time to crack that thing open and like learn a lesson. But he did have time for Obi-Wan's ghost to whisper to him, like, Luke, believe in yourself. Use the Force. Don't rely on these things. And that's how he shot that proton torpedo in the little exhaust vent and blew the whole thing up, and the movie ended.
Yep.
So I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say on that, but maybe, maybe we need to get in touch with our ancestors in a way that books cannot give us. They can remind us, but how do you get in touch with that where you can hear the spirit of your ancestors within yourself, where you can feel that connection? I think that's something that we long for. We want the truth. Like when you read a book, when you read a religious text, there's all these questions of like, yeah, but who messed with this? Who rewrote this? What was the reason behind that? There's this longing for the truth, like a direct contact to our past to open up our future.
I don't know.
And again, I don't. Yeah, again, I don't really know what I'm saying. It's just something I noticed.
I don't know. I for one have looked a lot into, I guess, my ancestry just by looking at like who the people who died, and being like, okay, so like basically like just family looking at one's family tree basically, and figuring out their stuff about that, like people's stories and what one can figure out about that. What did they do and these kind of things.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like that kind of like, I don't know, to some degree it helps to connect to one's ancestors, but I do feel also that, from, I don't know, like Jungian, but also a shamanic lens, because it's kind of like how I've been approaching this. It's, I don't know, there's certain traits and certain qualities that are within one's ancestors, and one can figure it out by learning more about one's ancestors' stories, or and about one's ancestors in some sense. We can learn about that, but I feel what I started to realize also is it's about tapping into these archetypal qualities, these different archetypes that run through one's family, to tap into that and to use that energy that's innate in that for one's own goals, for one's own what one wants to do. If one comes from a family of warriors, you can tap into that energy. You don't have to use it in the strict sense of, oh, I have to become a soldier now or something. No, actually, you can use that like warrior energy to fuel whatever endeavor one wants to do. But similarly, like if there's other archetypal energies there. And I guess in some way with the shamanic lens, I guess I've been like trying to, through like shamanic journey, and connect to the ancestors, and it would be like more symbolic in that sense. But it's another way to do it symbolically, but it's more symbolic than literal, and one would not exactly always be like I guess aware of exactly what ancestor is this, or is this like you don't know those things. But it's I don't know. But other than that, I mean, other ways would be, if one doesn't know any of these things, would just be to interact with the music of one's ancestors, like going back.
Yes.
Thinking like if one, for instance, one is an American, one has like German ancestry. You can tap into the older German music, or even go further back. I mean, you have like these bands like Heilung, for instance, or like, you know, these different Scandinavian bands. For me, it speaks a lot because of my ancestry specifically. But the thing is, you know, one can tap into these things and through music connect to one's ancestors or through art
Yes.
of the time. And I think that very much is even more profound than just to look at, you know, like just to look at one's like family tree. It's like it gives, if you can do that and you can figure these things out and their stories, is it like it will give you a certain depth. But I think really tap or like having this connection to one's ancestors and the past is through music, it's through art, and to really feel it, to tap into
Yes.
these feelings. Because otherwise, if
Yes.
it's just family tree and you look at these things, it remains information, and you don't feel it. If we feel it, then you tap into the deeper layers, into the genome, into the deeper parts of the mind. Because you know,
Yeah.
everything what happened with the ancestors, and like, you know, that led to this very point where you are at now as an individual, has also been influenced by one's ancestors and shaped. You know, one's brain has been shaped by that to some degree. You know, we have like agency to do whatever with it, you know, with these archetypal energies and like, you know, this ancestral energy, what we want. You know, we don't have to follow exactly in the footsteps of our ancestors, but we can use that and tap into that energy and use it for something that we want to do to build our
Right.
kingdom, how we see it.
Yeah, like when Obi-Wan fucked up, he wanted Luke to not make the same mistakes. He understood that Luke cannot do what Obi-Wan did because that's how he died. That's how they lost everything. He can't do what Darth Vader did either. And there has to be this balance in between. But I'd like to speak on this music part. Like that really
Yeah.
hit me hard what you said. Because I too resonate with some of the, you know, because we're of the same ancestry, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to this song by Wardruna
Yeah.
called "The Healing Mountain" several years ago,
Yeah.
and oh my God, dude, like it opened up something inside me that I did not know that I had. And I've listened to a lot of music, man. But when I heard that music, I was like, wow, I feel like I'm home somehow. I feel this, like it is deeply resonating with me. And it sounded like I could almost hear the voice of my ancestors, you know, crying out to me, trying to tell me something, speak to me in a certain way. It's still very powerful to this day. And it might be on a genetic level. Like, I don't know if everybody that is of a different ancestry would resonate as powerfully as that we do with that. They probably have their own music. I mean, definitely they have their own music they strongly resonate with that. Yeah,
Mm.
sure, I can vibe with, maybe I can dance to it, but does it touch me in the same way that the music my ancestors sang? I don't believe so. Um, and I think you're right. You know, we don't have Force ghosts. We don't have a Kwisatz Haderach like in Dune. We don't have these things, but these concepts are so powerful in our storytelling. Like
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars has that concept. Dune has that concept. Also, there's this really good 80s movie called Altered States.
Mm-hmm.
It's about this guy that, you know, this psychologist that experiments with sensory deprivation tanks while he's tripping on mushrooms and, you know, DMT and all this other stuff. So he jumps in the tank tripping hard. And what he achieves is something like in Dune, like the Kwisatz Haderach. Like he taps into his genetic memory and remembers stuff from, you know, our ape-like ancestors. And he remembers it so much that he embodies it and he transforms into like an early hominid, like an early human ape-like creature, and is like running around the laboratory like a crazy monkey. Um, by the end of it, he has to integrate all of this ancestral memory, not lose his mind, and you know, just, spoiler alert, you know, if anybody wants to watch this movie, mute this. But in the end, when he's like losing his shit again and transforming into this ape monkey thing, his wife is the one that has to save him. She has to, you know, like appeal to his humanity and help him balance that savage ancestral past with the intellectual future, because you need both to move on. You need both to have reality. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can't deny our past and wash it all away and act like we're never going to repeat that. And so he is able to integrate that shadow, the shadow representing the ape-like creature, with, the future better version of himself. And the love of his wife, saves him from this insanity, where he has both access to the past and an opening to the future with his queen.
Yeah.
So it's this concept of, how do we get in touch with our ancestors without books, is something that is very powerful today in, New Age circles, psychedelic circles.
Yeah. I can say something about that. It's actually been part of my practice of what I've been doing the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been really using a lot of music regarding that, especially from like Rodruna and like Heilung and these different bands. But I've been specifically, because I've been looking into these like Proto-Indo-European Koryos rituals for a while. And what I've been doing is, I looked at these anthropological studies, and I've been, putting the ritual like together more and more. And so what I've been doing is I started to reenact these rituals by myself in the woods, like during the day, and eventually during the night. I would also, more towards the night, evening, would go out and do that with my shaman drum. And I would be using the shaman drum and that music to really put myself back into that kind of, I guess, ancestral state of mind, and to tap into it through both the drum, but also through the music, and to feel into that. And I got quite a few times I got to the point where I was kind of like tapping into I don't know, I guess like a hunter-gatherer state of mind, where my mindset shifted towards that. But then I've been working on finding a balance between that kind of I guess mindset, and I don't know, it was exhilarating, and it felt really good to be in that hunter-gatherer mindset. It's kind of got inspired by this one channel, with this one dude who does that as well. I think he's Scottish, where he is both living in a modern sense, but also he reenacts his this more primal kind of hunter-gatherer kind of lifestyle. And I kind of was I don't know, after seeing that, and having looked into these Koryos rituals, it's I'm gonna do this too. And that's kind of what I started to do, and I feel that very much helped, together with the music and everything, combined with the drum, helped to tap into that ancestral energy in a very powerful way, to connect to that. And it's also very much part of these Koryos rituals as well, because at the end, when you go out and do these rituals, it's very much also about they are designed to tap into the ancestral energy, where at some point you kind of become your ancestors. You tap into that those from a psychological lens, archaic memories, these these ancestral kind of patterns and memories, where you can start to integrate them into yourself, and to integrate that. But it requires I don't know, it takes time to find the right music, to find the right to create that proper resonance, and that it takes experimentation and some courage to do so, and to allow oneself to, in I guess the Koryos rituals, to tap into the wolf archetype, and tap into this how you into this kind of the Koryos symbolism that's connected to that. But it's possible.
The on the topic of Proto-Indo-European, I got way into that, and I taught myself how to speak some of it, because I was like, this is the earliest language that we know of, and we're probably not even pronouncing it correctly, you know, because it's a dead language.
Yeah.
But I got so interested in it because of the, you know, consciousness. I know language is the bedrock of consciousness, and if you could learn how to speak the oldest language, you would begin to get in their mindset. You would be connected to them far more. And as I spoke the words of Proto-Indo-European, like the word earth is klut, K-L-U-T. It's klut.
Mm-hmm.
When you say that over and over, I get this sense of klut, heaviness, solid. You can jump up and down on it and it's not going anywhere. I don't know why. Maybe it's just me, but I got a sense, I got a feeling for the word itself. And it felt like I could like embody it more by saying it. Like they were more in touch with the embodiment of words. Their words felt more magical because they were more connected in the pronunciation. Because you say earth like klut, like with some force, like with a little, you know, gusto in your voice. Because the earth is a big, powerful bedrock of everything that we're on and everything that we are. And the word for blood in Proto-Indo-European is sangrenar, you know, like sangria and sangrada, you know, in Spanish. So, you know, these words are still kind of here, but I don't know, when I say sangrenar, it's like, I don't know, there's this magical charge to it for some reason, you know, like you're like blood, sangrenar, your blood, and earth, klut. You know, there's this power or this connection that you really feel. There's this particular, I don't know if you want to call it like I don't know, saying or something, but there's this whole saying that I memorized. Basically talking about you know, giving yourself to the earth so that one day your ancestors will be connected to your sacrifice and then come back to you in spirit. You know, like the people that die on the earth, their blood seeps into the earth and it sprouts out new things from these sacrifices that hopefully connect with your ancestors and their spirit will come back home to you. If you want, I can say it real quick. I don't know if it would be too.
Oh no, you can say it, Neirum.
Okay, let me try to remember it. Now that I'm on the spot, I'm nervous. I'm not remembering it. Let me think. Vatra sunu sangrenar klut. Tanus tevu perdu ardat. Guitwam uja kwayaza te patana. Nesma Aya. And that whole thing is, you know, we hope all of these things that we've done where we've spilled our blood into the ground will infuse you with our spirit and our love for you, that one day you will come back to us and we will be together, is basically, you know, the gist of what I just said.
Wow.
But when you say it, like when I'm saying that, it's like, I don't know, like it's such a powerful thing for those words to resonate out of your throat, out of your mouth, out into the air, off of the walls and back into your ears. It's, I don't know. Maybe that's just me though, but
I don't know.
It feels like a powerful connection.
I don't know, for me as well, regarding just like, it's not Proto-Indo-European, but it's like Proto-Norse, or like, you know, like Old Norse, regarding like some of the songs that I listen to and that I've listened to as well when I was doing these like Koryos ritual reenactments and deep in the woods, that I was singing through these songs as well and speaking these words, and I do feel that you know, these words, even if we would not completely understand them, the words themselves hold a resonance, within us. And I do feel so in like, that it holds this like deeper archetypal resonance that taps into, from a Jungian lens, the collective unconscious, the deeper ancestral memory that's there embedded within us. And I feel that like, a lot of the old rituals were exactly about that, to help one to tap into that. Like, the Koryos rituals specifically were about that. This period where you're wrestling with the shadow, and then eventually having this like death and rebirth ritual where you tap into the collective unconscious from a Jungian lens, and tap into that, into this ancestral memory, and those rituals were designed to that. We don't have that, but we know we do have like these bands now, like Radruna and Heilung, and like, and whatever else would apply to anyone listening, because it's about like, finding that resonance, and how does one know that? It's only through this feeling. It's like this inner knowing, this that one feels, and one knows when one hears it, and when like this music that speaks to like something that's deeper, that we can't really explain, like why are we like feeling this deep resonance that is there. And it's through finding these things that we can reconnect to it. But then also one has to keep in mind that we can utilize these energies for like our own transformation, and to utilize these energies to build our kingdom, and to tap into this like like King Archetype, and to embody this more as well.
Yeah, I think it's happening with the internet. Like I would have never learned that little line if I didn't have the internet. Like, how in the world would I have discovered that? But through my own path of self-individuation, I was like extremely interested in learning this. A lot of the stuff I learned about Proto-Indo-European, if you're interested, is by this guy named Dr. Anton Biltu. He is probably the leading expert in Proto-Indo-European, and trying to make it a spoken language again and embody that. For the same reasons I outlined, like tapping into the early human consciousness, and saying it, or even singing songs. He did the thing like Schrader's Fable. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, or if I'm saying that right even. But that's like an old Proto-Indo-European story that has survived all this time, that they're sort of trying to use to reconstruct the language and revive it.
Wow. Yeah, I've been looking into a lot of the mythology connected to it. Not as much the language as deep, in the sense of like to speak it in any sense of like understand and speak it in that sense. But definitely like it's been indeed an area of interest for me. And I don't know if you can like post it in the round table. Maybe I can like leave a link in the description for people to find it.
Yeah, I'll find a link of that guy and his I guess or information or courses or what, I don't know what it is, his papers that I read. But yeah, they're very interesting. And there's some videos on him speaking this language, and that's kind of what I did. I just like copied him, and because I couldn't like read it and know how to enunciate it. And even when I spoke it earlier, I wasn't enunciating it properly, because I don't want to be weird. You got to do like these guttural throat things, and you got to do this stuff with your nose, and I don't want to sound like I'm like casting spells on your podcast. But yeah, there's a whole other thing to how you actually embody the language.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like I think the power of it. And I think that's also one thing. There's a real there's a real power in words and power in speech that we have that can allow us to tap into certain things that we, like we maybe don't even know that we can. But, that's the power of words and language.
Yeah.
And I think we can very much utilize that to our own advantage when it comes to like personal growth or tapping into, like, in this case, the ancestral layer of the psyche.
Yeah.
And
No, you're totally right. Like, I don't want to, put that much power out in those old words that I said, because it's kind of, I don't know if scary is the word, but like, you're like, whoa. I don't know if everybody is like ready. I don't know. That's kind of insulting. I don't know if I want to, rock the boat so much by speaking so powerfully. Cause when I heard those words, when I heard that guy speaking those words, I don't know, it did something in my chest to where I felt like, whoa, like, what's he saying? I want to say those things. I want to see what happens when I say those words. And then when you say those words, like, something really strange happens. It's good. It feels good, but it's like it's like riding a giant wave and you're surfing. And, I don't know what I'm saying exactly, but, yeah, the words of our ancestors are so powerful, man. It does feel like you're speaking spells or something, like things that can affect the emotions of other people through the guttural enunciations and the power that you put into the syllables. It'll like, be like people like, whoa, like, what'd you just say? Well, that's making me feel stuff really deep, like how heavy you are on these inflections of these syllables and how deep you're going with that vowel. And it's sort of like, whoa. And I think in our modern language, we've done away with all of that. We do not speak powerfully. We speak logically. We try to be as clear as possible. And that power in our words is only reserved for politicians. Because, politicians will get into that. Leaders will get into that. A military commander will get into that power of the words and speak with force, casting their words out like spells to affect their surroundings and affect the hearts and minds of those around them.
Yeah.
But common people, everyday people, they don't do that, because it's kind of against etiquette, I guess. It's kind of like, whoa, dude, you're being a little too much. Like, chill the fuck out. Like, we're just hanging out here. Talking.
I guess it's one of the reasons really why I've chosen to do a lot of the stuff that I did in the woods, like deep in the woods. I've even though like I've scared some joggers with that happened to run into me, that happened to go also deep into the woods. But it's kind of the reason why I was there. It can pretty much terrify people to hear those kind of noises and all of that. But
it does. It's like a sign of, I guess me and you feel the same way. We want to be respectful. I don't want to, rock anybody's boat by doing Proto-Indo-European guttural noises, because, it's intense. And it's like, is this guy crazy? Like, what is he doing over here? But when you do it on your own without, the judgment of others, oh man, it's a very powerful reconnect to your ancestors.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Yeah. I remember that one time I was there just doing my thing there. This jogger came, and then they saw me there. They heard me making those noises, and they were just looking at me, and they just went like, okay, nope, and they went straight back the way they came. They were just like, nope, I am dealing with this.
Yeah, I'm out here in the woods. I don't know where else to go, guys. Sorry, but at least I'm not doing it on the street corner.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know regarding like the King Archetype and like we kind of like delved into ancestors now, which is relevant to the King Archetype too, because the King Archetype also connects to the ancestors as much as like the future generations as well. But I don't know if there's anything else to, I guess, add still about this. I've had like a great time with this talk, Neirum.
Me too, man. It's always a wild ride, and I feel like we get the most that we can without getting too off topic, you know. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it too, man.
Oh yeah, it's always I very much so. I don't know. There's so much one can say alone, but then when you get people together and you talk about these things, then just more comes out, and you start to really get to these deeper things that you might not get to on your own. I think that's kind of like the power of like having these like these talks together and I think it's I think it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on for hours and hours more, but I guess we'll leave that for the part 3, huh?
Yeah, probably. And we can still go into like God's wife part 2 and the one about the white rider and wind horse sons. Is one that I don't know, sparked a lot in me at least. I was just, I don't know, I had this like thought came to me. I don't know, it just hit me in one moment. I was like, wait a minute, Wind Horse and the White Rider and all this like Lord of the Rings stuff. I don't know, I'd been like watching Lord of the Rings, and I was just like, and it suddenly hit me. It's like, holy fuck, there's like symbolism in there, kind of like that touches upon this concept, and it's like, I don't know, it's like Lord of the Rings is like kind of like the gift that keeps on giving. It's like every time you watch it, you notice like something else.
Yes. Oh, yes. I've been doing that with Star Trek. I've been rewatching Star Trek, and of course, I've been watching a lot of Star Wars. I'm more of a sci-fi vibe. I love Lord of the Rings too, but I don't know, something about spaceships in me. I'm like, I want to be on a spaceship. But I've been rewatching the Next Generation. And man, I don't know if I'm getting older or what, but I'll watch some of those episodes and it'll just hit me, and I'll just fucking cry. I'm like, oh my god. But I think I'm sort of seeing the deeper archetypical dynamics going on there, and I resonate with them because I've experienced some of those things, and it touches me more deeply. Because when I was a kid watching Star Trek, I was like, oh, look at all the phasers and photon torpedoes and the spaceships and warp speed. But, as you get older, it means something totally different to me now. It's So anyway. Yeah.
But, I don't know, if we don't have to say anything more now, we don't have more to say maybe for part 2, we can maybe end it for this one, and we can still go into things in the future talks. I would say to everyone, would say Neirum,
time to land the plane.
Yeah. I would say Neirum, it's been a real pleasure to have you on again, and for everyone listening, thank you for being here. I think we had 9 views.
Ooh. Hey, that's a room full of people, man.
Oh yeah.
I'm happy with that. But yeah, thanks for having me on again, man. I'm always so happy to speak with you and work these things out. And it helps me a lot personally. Yeah, to just talk this stuff out. And I'm glad we can share it with others.
Oh yeah, me too. And likewise for myself too. I've noticed just wanna put it out there like I've noticed how having these conversations, is indeed helping everyone. It's we're on our own journeys, and we're coming here together in the round table, and we're talking these things out, and we're talking about these things, and we're coming to all kinds of realizations that we just wouldn't have gotten to on our own. And I think that's kind of the power of this. And
totally.
Yeah. But I wanna end it on that good note. So
yes.
Yeah. Take care, everyone.